Okay, let's reel it back in, just like you're fishing like this. I'm talking about reeling it back in from London all the way back here to home sweet home Malaysia. Why? Because it's exactly where Avery is reporting from for his own segment all about video games and such. It's time for Gamer Station.
Hey, Avery Score here with another titillating episode of the Gamer Station, where today we're taking a look at the upcoming console war. It promises to be a bloody one. Now, if you followed the Electronic Entertainment Expo, as always, in LA, you noted probably one big thing, that Microsoft was in a terrible position coming out of that conference. To much fanfare, they unveiled the Xbox One, their upcoming console. But the news that stole the show was the draconian digital rights management policy. Essentially, two things were announced. One, that the console had to be online, essentially at all times, or at least at regular intervals, in order to revalidate the digital rights that you have over your content. And two, they were allowing publishers the option to invalidate used games. That means that it's linked to one user, and if you want to resell that game to someone or simply lend it, that person can't use it unless they decide to revalidate that game, of course, for a price. Now, that represents a departure on console, although that perhaps is a familiar model on other forms of media, such as streaming movies on Netflix, where it shocks fewer people that you never really own the content. You never really hold anything in your hands, you're just paying for its occasional use. That's perhaps in part because people are used to doing things like renting movies. Sure, we've had games rentals as well, but that's pretty much gone the way of the dinosaurs in the age of cheap content, the ability to stream it, and the ability to make micro purchases online. People aren't used to the idea of buying something and never really owning it. So of course that was a very unpopular decision by Microsoft. It really took the air out of the room and took the enthusiasm out of even the most stalwart Microsoft and Xbox supporters. No announcements of a new Halo could manage to belay that. On the Sony side, they announced with great smirks on their faces that their console would bear no such restrictions, that used games would remain yours forever, and they even had a very cute sort of public service announcement where they gave the steps necessary to lend a game. It was just one, hand the game to your friend, and he can play it. So Sony came out of that conference with a lower price point than the Xbox One for its PS4, a less restrictive digital rights management policy, and consequently was crowned the victor by much of the video game and mainstream presses. What happened after was a little bit unexpected. Microsoft did essentially a huge 180-degree turn on its digital rights management policies, announcing two things. One, that the games will not need to be revalidated if they're given to a second owner, and two, the console will not need to be always online in order to validate your digital rights management. Obviously that's very popular, and there are certain analysts, including the always great Penny Arcade, which have likened this to a new Coke scenario. If you remember in the 80s, Coca-Cola Corporation introduced a new flavor of Coke. It was widely unpopular, people were protesting, riots in the streets, cats and dogs sleeping together, total mayhem, and then hot off the heels of that, they introduced Original Coke, which was essentially the same thing. Did Microsoft make a similar marketing move in order to make the old flavor seem more exciting, if you will? It's speculation to say either way, and indeed it is possible. My personal opinion is no, they had a bit of a snafu and they turned it around. Whether they were wrong or not about whether this kind of draconian digital rights management policy represents the future of gaming, only time will tell. I think that given the rampant piracy, especially in regions such as our own, some sort of more restrictive DRM policy will and must happen in order to ensure the future of gaming. Games cost a lot of money to make. They require large teams of hundreds of people in order to have the kind of presentation values and graphical aplomb to which we become so accustomed, and consequently money has to be spent in order to justify their continued creation. So what's new that these consoles are going to bring to bear? Well, of course, there's going to be an increased reliance on connectivity and network features. The PlayStation 4 has that cool tactical pad on the back of the controller, which offers new gameplay mechanics possibilities to developers should they choose to use it. But of course, what everyone's buzz about, as always, is the graphical potential represented by the beefy specs of these new consoles, which are indeed comparable to those of high-end PCs today. So in terms of graphics, there's a very naturalistic urge that runs as an undercurrent through games and games development today, the desire desire to make these games as realistic as possible. Last week on the show, we reviewed The Last of Us, which is a game that's very much evident of this motive within gameplay development. The Last of Us has these gorgeous environments with nature kind of becoming a dominant force again and reclaiming the city, which is degraded in very artful ways. It really excels in terms of its lighting effects with particles and motes floating across the camera, and the characters are expressive, and when they interact with each other you really feel the weight of the emotion and the weight of the decisions that they have to make behind them. So everyone always asks this, how much more realistic can games get before it's just too realistic and we end up in the uncanny valley and things are weird? And you know what, that has never happened yet. What is apparent, however, is that game makers need to stop relying on movie tropes and cinematic tropes in order to fuel how games work. Again, The Last of Us is an example of doing that and getting beyond it as well. It's kind of a transitional piece. It could easily be described as cinematic in some of the tenser moments, and someone who's not accustomed to games, seeing that for the first time, will interpret it sort of as a film. But what's good about that is some of the tenser moments are told through gameplay and not through simple cutscenes. Otherwise, it's nothing more than a technical demo. I think that this next generation of consoles will prove paramount in the development of gaming, both to a casual audience and in cementing the ever-stalwart hardcore audience. And the graphical potential that we'll see out of these consoles won't be realized in the next year or 2 years to come. Like most generations of consoles, it'll be midway to the end of its cycle before developers start using every ounce of potential from those systems. In any event, there's a console war a-brewing, and I don't really care who comes out on top, because in the end, the people who win are you and me, the gamers, and we're gonna bash it out at home. I'm Avery Score, and this was the Gamer Station.
Jet lag is tiring, I'll be completely honest. Therefore, we're gonna wrap the episode up right now, but I would absolutely love to hear from you. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, multiple ways of getting hold of us. Just, write out whatever you have to say, because we adore your feedback in a nutshell. My name is Adam Carruthers. It's time for me to sign off, but of course, we'll be back same time, same place very soon with a brand new season with lots more in store just for you. Till next time.